What an honor it is to be here on World Teacher Day. This is a celebration like no other, as you all know. And thank you for joining us for this very important segment that we've called Resisting Opportunism in a Time of COVID. We are so honored to have our guest. I think of her as a guest star. She is a dear friend, an activist, and a prolific author. If you have not read Diane Ravitch, you need to get to your bookstore as soon as possible. And let's bring Diane on now. We are so honored to have you here. Welcome, my friend. And I did mention the books that you have. I've got them all in my personal library. The Death and Life of the Great American School System, Reign of Error, the hoax of the privatization movement and the danger to America's public schools, and your latest that you sent me with an autograph. So thank you so much. Slaying Goliath, the passionate resistance to privatization and the fight to save America's public schools. And Diane, I know that you have, as a historian, you focused on American public schools, but we know that this is a global attack about turning public education into corporate profits. And here we are talking about resisting opportunism in the time of COVID. Perhaps no one person comes to my mind who's found more insidious ways of pushing that privatization agenda than America's own Secretary of Education, Trump's Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, who calls education the future education industry. You've studied her, you've studied this movement. And so we're hoping you can give us some insight into DeVos and exactly why you call her dangerous.
Well, thank you. First of all, let me say, Lily, that I'm honored to be with you and with Education International to to salute teachers around the world. There's no more important profession because without teachers, we have no future. And teachers are the bearers of our culture, our civilization, and they enable civilization to thrive, and we need you. So Betsy DeVos was actually an appropriate choice for Donald Trump because Donald Trump doesn't believe in the public sector, and Betsy DeVos doesn't believe in the public sector. They don't believe that there is such a thing as the common good, that we have any responsibility for anyone else other than ourselves. So they are extreme individualists, and they seek to fracture and frankly, to destroy American public education. And their ideas, I hope, will be stopped in the next election because it's a very selfish and egotistical point of view. And I think I have been studying the privatization movement now for a decade, and I think that its primary interest is in keeping taxes low. It is supported not by the people, because every time there is a public election, the privatization agenda goes down overwhelmingly to defeat. It's supported by billionaires, and it's billionaires like in America, the Koch brothers. Now there's one Koch brother, the DeVos family, and a long, long list of billionaires, most of them very, very conservative, who use their money to promote charter schools, vouchers, homeschooling, for-profit online learning, anything other than public schools. And what they're trying to do, and have succeeded in a few places, is to erode our sense of responsibility for the children of all the community. The great American idea of public education was that we are all responsible for the children, for everyone's children, because they're our children. They will determine what our society will be in the future. And we pay taxes for public education, whether we have children in public school, whether we have any children at all, because this is our responsibility as citizens. And what the privatization movement has been trying to do for many, many years, and Betsy DeVos started in this business of privatization 30 years ago. She's devoted her life to turning public funding to religious and private schools. But what we know is at the base of this is a belief that the public sector is somehow inefficient and incompetent and the private sector is better. What we have learned over these past 20 years, as we've had more and more privatization with vouchers and charters, is that privatization is an open invitation to profiteering. And there have been many scandals where millions of dollars have been misappropriated because of a lack of transparency, a lack of accountability. And we have seen voucher schools, for example, that have no responsibility at all to the state. They don't take the same tests as the children in public schools, and they are free to discriminate. They're free to discriminate based on any grounds they wish because they are religious schools. And in Florida, for example, the schools, the voucher schools state openly on their website that there are children that they do not accept, and their staff members they will not hire. One example is that they will not allow gay couples or gay children to homosexual children to attend their schools. And when this was exposed in a newspaper series in Florida, the legislature said, we're not going to change that because they're religious schools and they're free to do whatever they want, including to discriminate. One of the great advances in public education was to apply civil rights laws so that every public school has a responsibility to educate every child, regardless of who they are and what their background and what their race or ethnicity or religion. And the move towards privatization is a move towards separation, classism, racism, sexism, name it. And it's the very opposite of public education, which is open to all.
So Diane, you've said in a nutshell, you've said that is exactly what the movement is all about, shamelessly about. Talk a little bit about any experiences you've had or studies that you've done about how this isn't just in the United States. This is global. I know that you have a lot of knowledge about some of the things that were tried in African countries, for example.
Well, yes, there was a corporation created to make money. And the board of the corporation included Pearson and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and the World Bank, some of the richest, most powerful people in the world. And it's called Bridge International Academies. And they were seeking contracts from the governments of Kenya and Uganda to educate, to replace their public schools. And they were not using trained teachers. They were giving teachers earpieces and giving them instructions and iPads or some form of computer to basically deliver scripted lessons and charging the families who sent their children $1 a month. Now, in an impoverished country, $1 a month is a lot of money. But if you multiply that times 1 million children, that could be a profitable business. But what it actually does is to relieve the government of its responsibility to provide free and universal public education. This move was strongly opposed by civil society groups and also by the teachers' unions because it was a move to replace unions. I happen to be a strong believer in teachers' unions because I think they are the voice not only of the profession, but they defend education and the appropriate funding of education. And one of the things the privatization movement has fought for very hard is to eliminate teachers' unions. They have filed lawsuits. They have one of the big pushes in the US behind the charter school movement is to eliminate teachers' unions. More than 90% of our charter schools are non-union. The same thing is true of the efforts of Bridge International Academy and similar organizations that promote privatization in the third world, and that is to replace professional teachers with scripted curriculum and untrained personnel. And the only voice that teachers and that educators have is the union, and where there's no union, the profiteers can do whatever they want to do.
So true. And yeah, my experience right now, one of the things that those profiteers were so sure of in places, organizations like K12.com and others, is we could just put it all online. Parents can just teach their kids in the kitchen table. If COVID has done anything, it has shown how hard it is to be a teacher, to teach children. I had 39 fifth graders one year. That was not healthy for children and other living things on the best day. And it took all the talent that I had to be able to reach those kids. And so I think parents are more and more on our side. So, and parents are the public. So I want you to take the last 5 minutes that we have together. I can't believe how fast this time has gone. To talk a little bit about how important it is that the public understand this agenda. We have an important election coming up in the United States in November, but this is a global audience here with us, Diane. So talk a little bit about the importance of the public, of democracy, of the consequences of the choices that we make in an election.
Well, you mentioned K-12 Inc., and that is the largest of our virtual online corporations. It operates for profit, is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Its top 5 executives share compensation of $28 million. I mean, this is an immensely profitable business. It has terrible outcomes. And when you entrust your child as a parent to a school, you expect that they will not be shaped by a corporation that is for profit, but rather be exposed daily to experienced teachers who have a code of professional ethics. And that's what you do when you send your child to a good public school. You expect them to have those good experienced teachers and reasonable class sizes. The danger to democracy well, first of all, we've learned from the COVID that the danger of online learning is that children are very bored, they're unmotivated, and it's not good education. So there's nothing good about this horrible pandemic, but parents have learned a lesson, and that is that they want schools, they want teachers, they want real people. They understand that education is a human interaction. It's not an interaction between a person and a machine. It's an interaction between a living, trained, experienced teacher and the children in front of him or her. Education is very tightly connected to the idea of democracy, because a democracy cannot survive without educated citizens. And we need our citizens to have a broad understanding of history and civics and science and mathematics, obviously to be literate. All of these things are very important, but they all require adequate funding. In the United States and in many countries, the COVID crisis has caused a sharp drop in the amount of money allocated to education. And I think that's a terrible mistake, because we must protect our children. We must protect our future. We must rely on schools that are led by professional educators, not by anyone who happens to want to make money from our kids. And this is, I think, a golden opportunity for schools to see a renaissance and for the corporations to be turned away. And I think the most important thing right now is to be aware that the tech companies and many entrepreneurs are looking on education as a business opportunity. And you must bear in mind, your child is not a business opportunity. Your child is not a profit opportunity. Your child is one precious human being, or 2 or 3, however many you may have, but they have one life, and that life must be precious to you and their teachers. And that's what should happen in public schools. It doesn't always happen. Public schools are not perfect. They have to be made better, but they can't be made better by defunding them. They can't be made better by competition with a second system and a third system and a fourth system. They must be made better by parents and teachers working closely together, by communities supporting their schools, by communities saying, yes, we will raise our taxes, we will pay more, because we want the best people in our children's classroom. And frankly, parents are sick and tired of the online learning. So I'm hoping that the pandemic will be conquered in the nearest possible future, whenever it is. But when it's over, that we once again understand that education is the most important responsibility that our society has if we want to have a good future.
Diane, there is no way to thank you for your passionate advocacy, for your wisdom, and for the articulate way that you have explained to people who may not think about these things every day the way educators do, how important it is that we keep the common good of public education. And I'm glad you said it's not perfect, but it's our job to make it constantly better. And we are not going backwards. Privatization takes us to a very dark place, and we are not going there. So I want to thank you for joining us on World Teacher Day. We've never tried anything like this before, but I think thousands and thousands of educators and just interested people all over the world are going to be hearing your voice. I hope that they will find your books and share your message, because it's a message that protects public education and the students that rely on it. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you to all the teachers around the world who are taking care of our future for us. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Be well.